Hi guys, just a disclaimer before the video begins. The first maybe 7-8 minutes on the YouTube version of this podcast, the lag is a bit clear to see, so there may be times where it's a bit fuzzy, a bit blurry, but after the first 8 minutes, it then goes into normal quality footage. So if you are watching on YouTube, then be patient. It will be better quality picture as the video goes on. Hope you enjoy.
You saw me standing alone, without a dream in my heart, without a love of my own. I said, blue moon, you saw me standing alone, without a dream in my heart, without a love of my own.
Hello and welcome to the Eurotrips Football Podcast. It's time for another season preview, and this time it's a turn of the champions, that is Manchester City. And with me, I've got a first timer to the podcast, but a guy I've been on his podcast before, Asleep at Work, which is an NFL-based podcast. We will get more on that at the end of the podcast, but in the meantime, here with me today is Aaron Fletcher. How are you, mate? How is life?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, not too bad. It's I wish I could be sitting here and saying that, I was with a fan who, after what you guys done to us the last few years, I wish I could be saying this. I'm not saying you were champion, to be honest. I was cheering on Arsenal, but at the same time, it is what it is. And I'd rather be Arsenal losing it than us losing it. At least we were nowhere near it this time, whereas normally most of your title wins have come at the expense of us. But thankfully,
Yeah, I
not
think
this time.
was asked this before in terms of the NFL, because with who I was kind of with supporting the Detroit Lions, we've had years where you get absolutely battered, and then years where every game you're in it just about and still somehow manage to lose those really close games. And someone asked me, like, what would you rather do? And surely, like, it'd be the ones where you lose the close ones, because it's so you've got the kind of the excitement, and you still kind of a lot of those games you're in there. Nope, I'd rather get blown out the water and be able to just say, yeah, we weren't there. I'd rather not have the added drama of running it myself to the last day. So I don't blame you on that one. I'd rather also not be in extremely close title races, whether we win them or lose them. I'd just rather not be in the really close title races, to be honest with you. Um, but not just champions either. I just want to remind you that we are also champions of Europe.
Mhm.
Just want to throw that one in there as well, just to get us going.
I gotta say, I actually look more fondly back at the year where we finished third after winning the league than I do the year where we not 2 years ago because he won trophies, but say I look more fondly back at that season 2021, the 20 to 2021 than I do the for example the 18-19 season. No, sorry, not that season. That I'm thinking of 13-14. I'd much rather I look more fondly
Yes.
back at that season where we came third miraculously, had that great end of the to the season. Now we did them a year where we came second to you guys because that season when we came third, apart from maybe I think we were top of Christmas or around about Christmas, but really since January, midway through January, we knew we weren't winning the league, and for a while it looked like we weren't even making top four. But when it's the other way around, where it's in your hands, and you've got what was it, 4 games left to win the league, and the incident with
Yeah.
I'm not saying the S word, but that happened in 2014, and yeah, like that's still to this day, along with the Gundogan goal against Villa, those two moments always just still to this day like break my heart. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's but yeah, no. Obviously, going back to obviously not just the Champions League, not just the Premier League, but also the FA Cup, which meant that you're the second team to win the treble, but
Yes.
kind of obviously behind obviously Manchester United. First of all, how was that for you? Not only to see, well, three things: not only to see your team win the Champions League for the first time in the club's history, not only to be the second team in history to win the treble, but also to now stop your local rivals not only winning the FA Cup as you did in the final, but also stop them now being the only team not to win the treble. No, sorry, stop them being the only team to have won the treble.
Yeah. I think, look, it's one of those things where the league, we've been there, done that, bought the t-shirt now on numerous occasions. I think it's only been one or maybe two times that we've won the league, and it hasn't gone down to the last game of the season. And having won the game, well, sorry, it was like twice now. So having won the league with a couple of games to go, just let it allowed that to kind of sink in a little bit more. We've done it, it's okay, and we can kind of have that celebration on its own. The FA Cup, I've said for a long time that since, in fact, well, to be quite honest, I was saying it on the day as well, that meant so much. And I was very lucky to be there in 2011 for the semi-final at Wembley, where we beat them 1-0. And I remember being stood in Wembley and looking at a load of the people in the stands with us and just saying, "Is this it? If this is it, if this is the pinnacle of this team right now, I'll take it. We've just done United in 1-0 at Wembley, and it's not even for a trophy. We'll take it. That's everything." So to be able to win the FA Cup against them at Wembley was something beyond anything that any of us could have asked for. I know a lot of Blues. I think maybe it's a social media performative side of it. Maybe it's not, but I know a few Blues who would have said, if you would have asked us if we can win one of the Champions League or that FA Cup, they'd have taken the FA Cup. But all the crap we were given growing up for everything that kind of meant. And I bet you any money now, if you turn around to an Everton fan now and ask them the same thing, if they were in the Champions League final or they had the chance to do Liverpool at Wembley, I bet a lot of Everton fans would love to just take the one against Liverpool at Wembley, because of the rivalry. But the Champions League was really beyond the special one. When we were in the final a couple of years ago, I was working all day, and I just got off. I was recording something in Manchester, and I got off a little bit before the final started. So all day I was busy, which kept my mind off it. Whereas this time round, I had nothing on, and I kind of sat on my own almost all day in my own like little space, and then started watching the BT coverage. And when it comes to football, my wife is fuming because apparently I just look stoic on our wedding day, but when anything football related comes on the TV like this, I am buckets of tears. So I'm like getting emotional in it all. And I have a thing where no matter what, I like to try and watch as much of this football with my little brother. Just turned 13. Mine and his our growing up with Manchester City has been very, very different. Up to the age of about 13. So I was watching the final with my little brother, and he said, I think one thing I kind of just want to throw out here before we move on. He looked at me and he said, "Oh, what do you reckon to today?" And I went, "Don't even talk to me. I feel sick. I feel sick to my stomach. I don't want to talk about it until the final whistle goes. Don't talk to me. I want to watch it and I want to be here with you for it, but don't talk to me." And he goes, "What you on about? It's only Inter Milan. We'll do them." It took me a minute to have that whole kind of, his relationship with this club is very different. What he's witnessed throughout his lifetime and the expectation that he has is very, very different from what I grew up with watching and the expectation I had. He had the David Silvas and the Sergio Agueros. I had your Antoine Sibierskis, your Joey Bartons, and your Georgios Samarases. We are different people in this sense. And I nearly decked him. But that was beyond special. I spent an hour in the garden after in silence after we'd done the trophy lift and all that sort of stuff. But I just kind of sat there taking it in. And the next day I was in Leeds doing some work. And again, I think it's just good to get my mind off it, because otherwise I was in my own little world. And I just kind of said to someone the other day, they were asking like, how do you feel about it all and the Champions League and winning it at that? I was like, I was at the parade. I watched the bus go past multiple times. I've seen that trophy in the hands of Haaland and Diaz and Ake and all and lot. I've got photos of it that I took, and I still don't believe it. So it's something that I know it's a very long-winded way of saying it's something beyond anything that I could have ever asked for. So the kid growing up watching Manchester City and just hoping we stay up is something that I'm going to say this very careful. I won't say it's something money can't buy, but that's not a conversation for today. It's something that it's beyond the wildest dreams that I think I could have asked for, especially as a child. So still don't believe it though.
That is fantastic. I mean, it's one of those things where I genuinely feel that we had the chance to do a treble the year we won the league, but then we had that week where Adrian basically lost both games to the FA Cup and the Champions League. And, I thought that was for me, that season for me was really, I was saying to my dad, this is as good as it's going to get. We're 15, 20 points clear in the league. We were flying high in the Champions League and we were doing all that. And often COVID hit and it came a different story. But, it's one of those things where my brother was sadly too young when Man U won the treble, but I'm sure he'd have been the exact same as you. I mean, really, life doesn't get any better than that. And really, for you, we are still skipping questions slightly ahead of time, but sort of what you experience now the treble. I know you got the Super Cup to look forward to and the Club World Cup.
Yeah.
Really, in terms of the season coming up for Man City, but in the future, can it get any better than that? Really, with the first Champions League win, beating Man United to the FA Cup, winning the treble, winning really what some people thought was a one-horse race, and winning it with 5 games remaining or whatever it was. So for you, going into this season, does it feel like it really can't get any better? And really, is it hard to get high depth for it? The fact that it can't get better than what in life maybe than what you had last season.
Do you know what I said to you before? I've been thinking about a lot of the things you were going to ask me today, and it's really hard to. This is probably the hardest question I'll ever have to answer. I don't know. It's that old adage of like kind of the first time you do something will always be more special than the second time or the third. And I think you look at how truly difficult it is to win a treble, and any kind of treble. And I know that we in this country we call it we have the treble where it's the Champions League, Premier League, and FA Cup. And I know that you've had Liverpool have done a treble. No matter what, it's so difficult to do. And so it's how do you as and I know look everyone can argue about who's the best of all time, but I think it's undoubtable that Pep's an elite level manager and he's what he's incredible at is getting the best out of the people that he works with. How do you walk into that dressing room right now and say, right, let's go again, and let's have that hunger? Your younger players, your Fodens, your Haalands, people like players like that. Haaland's got other goals, and Foden's got other goals to work towards for the rest of the career. They're players who were only just starting their careers, so they'll have a million other goals that they're working towards. But a lot will be said about this probably later on in the podcast. But like your Mahrez's, your Bernardo's, the Gundogan's of the world. What do you say to people like that? And I know Gundogan's already gone, but your Kevin De Bruyne's, what do you say to them? They're nearing the end of the career. This is the best it's going to get for them. So I don't know. It's to be seen, I guess. I don't think it will. As a fan, I don't think it can get any better. And we might have to recognize that nothing's going to quite hit this same feeling again unless we do a Real Madrid and win the Champions League like 3-4 times in a row or something like that. And you can claim something else that's historical, but nothing we do now from this point, I don't think will be historical or game changing or anything like that. It's the big things have been done now.
That is it. And I think that really, I think people are looking at how can a team dismantle City? How can they do what Liverpool did a few years ago and stop that run? How can the team stop them. I think really I think will be the best way to do it rather than on the pitch. I think that in terms of talent on the pitch, I think that people look at likes of Arsenal getting Declan Rice and that could improve Arsenal. People look at Chelsea having Poch now and they're getting rid of a lot of deadwood, and Man U just bought or buying Anana, I should say, who played very well in the final. And you look at other like Casper Hodgland, who could be a superstar. And I think all these things come to factor, but really, I think that's the thing that's going to stop City winning the league is the fact that is the desire. And I think that helped us in a way because City players had won 2 in a row. They that desire wasn't there as much. And I think that we saw Jack Grealish celebrate a lot, and all the players were celebrating a lot. John Stones, De Bruyne, Haaland, all these players were basically celebrating like they knew it. It was like this is as good as it gets. And I think that's going to stop City winning the league is the fact that it's their desire. Are they going to have that desire to go again? Whereas you saw other teams, I think Arsenal may have what we had when we won the league in terms of that desire to you came so close to winning it, and you haven't really lost anyone. Obviously, Dave, unlike us, bought players, improved their squad. And I think that's why Arsenal could be more of a benefit than City because they know what it's like to lose the league. They saw City players win the league. They lost that game at Forest, and they would have then on been very keen to make up for that. And I think really other teams might get involved as well, but I think that these teams need to be aware of that, and that's really how they can capitalise on that. And I think that's the way City are going to. The one's going to beat themselves rather than teams beat them. I think that's the best way for teams to try and beat City. But
I think so. And sorry, just to kind of jump on what you're saying there as well, though. I think we're going to lose a lot of pieces this summer. Like I said, Gundogan's already gone, and there are a number of players who are reportedly ready to leave, if not pretty much already packed the bags and houses up for sale and all that kind of thing. So there's going to be a lot of refreshing going on within the squad. Which believe it or not, I was reading a stat the other day that actually throughout the year in the Premier League we had less players play throughout the season than almost any other club in the league. So like that whole kind of we've got 4 squads that had walked the league the squad was already quite pretty thin, to be quite honest with you. So we're losing quite a few pieces. And what I've seen Liverpool do, especially with the McAllister signing, which I thought was fantastic. Very, very jealous of that one. And then watching what unfortunately United are doing and Arsenal have done, and I'm not 100% set on Chelsea, but I do like Pochettino. I think he's a very good manager. And we'll get Chelsea going again in some way, shape, or form. Everyone's strengthened themselves. And we need to be careful of that league was still very close for some time. And Arsenal's biggest problem was when things started to go against them, having the appropriate backups to come on and change a game and things like that. But they've got that. They're adding those pieces now. So they're not going to struggle as much throughout the season. Those kind of dips that they went through are not going to be as big. Liverpool, you can't keep Klopp down for very long. If you can keep Klopp down with whatever investment, we'll talk about, Klopp gets the best out of people. And so far, what we've seen from Erik ten Hag, especially in the second half of the season, is a million miles off what Man United were in the first half of the season. So if they continue that run of form, I think with what could potentially be a regress, I don't think we might not even be in that title race this year. I think it could be, that everyone else has strengthened themselves in a lot of very, very good ways.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think Poch is a different side. It's interesting to know how he's not famously not handle egos when he's at PSG, and it's interesting how he's going to manage with a team where, unlike Tottenham where he had a set 11, I don't think Potter knew. I don't think Lampard knew their best 11, and I think that if he finds his best 11, I think he'll be fine. But there's so many players they brought in that could be the issue. But I think the teams you mentioned there, I don't think we'll be involved. I think top 4, I think we'll make, but I don't think at the moment, I don't think we've done enough for me personally to warrant challenging for a title. And I think that losing Henderson for his impact on the dressing room and all that, I think could be a big loss. A bit like when you lost Vincent Kompany for the first year. But really talking of big misses in the team, and just going for the quick ins and outs. I mean, loans out. Of course, Liam Delap's gone to Hull. He's the main one, really. Callum Dawes gone to Leicester. But the two main outs include Benjamin Mendy, who I can say his name now because he has been cleared.
Mhm.
But also the big one, Ilkay Gundogan, and he's obviously. I've said it before in many tweets. I said it to you privately that I think he is the next, the most close thing we've got. Didier Drogba is Gundogan, because every big game, whether it's FA Cup final, 2 goals, whether it's Premier League, obviously the Villa game last season, I think he scored 2 that day, and also the goal against Leeds or against Everton, one of the best goals I've seen all season. Every big
Everton.
game, every big game, whether it's this season, last season, or the years before, he was a big part of that. And I think that whilst you brought in only one player, that was Kovacic to replace Gundogan, and I think whilst I do think he's a great player, and I think that he's very underrated. Do you think that the loss of Gundogan, how crucial do you think that'll be? Because Kovacic, as good as he can be on the pitch, I don't think anyone, let alone him, can replace what Gundogan had in terms of just how clutch he's been in big games and big moments for Man City over the Pep Guardiola era.
Yeah, well, he was Pep's first signing for a reason. He was, I think it took until, I feel like after the Everton game, not the Everton game, after the Aston Villa game season before, when he won us the league and with like 15 minutes to go, people, a lot of people, including myself, actually turned around and went like, it's been easy to overlook someone like Gundogan for a while until, and unfortunately, we live in kind of a society where we look at the goals and the assists rather than necessarily the genuine impact that someone's having. And Gundogan's been clutch and been fantastic since he joined. He's had some bad games, he's had some incredible games, but over the last couple of years, I think it's stepping up in that role of bringing those goals and assists as well, especially the goals that he's done. I think more than before in the big games. But he's been. We can talk about the Villa game. We can talk about the United game. We can talk about the goal against Everton. But actually, and I think I'll never forget that goal he scored against Tottenham. I think where Edison just lumped it forward and he took that one touch. And I can't remember who the Tottenham defender was, but he left him flat on his face. And it's so funny looking back at it now because I just watched the Tottenham defender just fall on his face in the box. But again, goals like that, his technical skill is out of this world. His ability to turn up in a big game is incredible, and the leadership that he was captain for a reason as well. And I watched some of the documentaries, the behind the scenes stuff, how he's kind of talking to the team. I was getting them going, and how the whole squad absolutely love him and look the way they look to him. There's a reason why some of the interviews he's been having with Pep, he looks like he's going to go into coaching or management afterwards, and that shows in just his personality and who he is and the way he is on the pitch. He's a true born leader. So I think you've got the ability on the pitch, but you've also got the leadership and the person side of it as well. And I don't know Kovacic. I'm not going to exactly turn around and say he's a bad guy. He seems like a lovely person from what I've seen, but how his personality will mold into the dressing room is remains to be seen. But kind of that on the pitch thing, I think Kovacic is never going to be to replace him. Gundogan was, I think, is it La Pausa, the Spanish term that Pep likes a mix, and he likes a few La Pausa players who stop the game, take a second, see the whole game for what it is. And I don't think Kovacic is necessarily one of those players. And Pep likes a La Pausa player for a La Pausa player, not. So I think it's going to be a case of 2 or 3 players are going to, as daft as it might sound at times, 2 or 3 players are going to be needed to fill Gundogan's shoes and the role that he played in stopping the game and having the vision and being able to be box to box and being able to play the passes and be able to get into the box and do those things. 3 or 4 different players might have to take that role on. Your Fodens, please, for the love of God, your Bernardos will be the ones who will probably have to, as a kind of a community, take that role.
Yeah, I agree, and especially the fact that we've seen so many players over the years have struggled in their first year under Pep. I mean, Grealish famously Rodri, has gone on for me now. He's the best DM in the world, certainly in the Premier League. And I think that he took a while. He took a year to settle in. Some players straight away, like of Haaland, but a lot of players, they took a while to settle into Pep's system. I think that when you mix in losing such a key part of the dressing room, both on and off the pitch in Gundogan, and you're placing him in that position with someone who hasn't yet had a time to adapt to Pep's system, and he may be one of those players that do again take a while. So I think, I think City, you're in a position where you can sort of almost, if you don't win the league, but you can win the Champions League, then it's like, oh, that's absolutely fine. So I think, City, obviously, I think I'll be shocked if we don't win some sort of trophy next year, whether it's Premier League or Champions League or even like a cup double or something. I think that, it is the law of averages. No one, very rarely, especially in Premier League, do you see a team win it again and again? And no one's won it 4 years in a row. And that could be the desire they need, being the first team to win 4 Premier Leagues in a row. So I think that is something they could look at. But I think, they have to be really wary of the likes of Arsenal and Man U for me. And I think that, I think that is really where you have to look at it. So that leads me really to our next question, which normally is at the end of the podcast, but we sort of flipped the script today a little bit. We sort of gone against the grain, but these are the podcasts.
I apologize. I tend to do that to people.
No, it's good. It's I don't sound too sentimental here, but it is like nice when these podcasts happen because it just shows more natural conversation, and I think that it shows. Obviously, me and you have been on podcasts before. We've DM'd regularly. It's not like we're talking for the first time, so we can have that more relaxed and natural chat. So it's good. It's good to have it. But yeah, we've mentioned it then. Table prediction. Of course, you are the 5th guest to come on so far. So we've had Newcastle, Forest, Bournemouth, and Villa. Now it's clear from that you're going to be the most optimistic fan of the 5 in terms of table position, with so far Keg having the lead the way was 5th. Eduardo, our Villa fan, had 7th, with Jay his 13th for Forest, and Oliver Lee's 14th place for Bournemouth. So obviously we know it's going to be higher than 5th. I think it would be a crazy one to put you 5th or 6th. But what quick question for you, Aaron. Where in the table are Man City finishing this season?
I'm going to be a bit conservative and say 2nd.
Okay.
It feels really weird to say I'm being conservative. We're just not quite going to win the league. That feels really, really, really weird to say. But after you've won 3 in a row, it feels almost conservative to say. I think we'll miss out on it this year. I wouldn't be entirely surprised if we came 3rd, but I'm going to say 2nd just because we find a way not to drop it too far.
And a quick bonus question. Things like Super Cup, Club World Cup, and Champions League, how far do you see your team going in those competitions?
I mean, we win the Club World Cup.
Mm-hmm.
Champions League is a really weird one because I think we go far. I'm going to say semis, get to the semi-finals, and then I don't know, get beat by like Real Madrid or something. And then like FA Cups, I think we'll end up quarterfinals. So I don't think we're gonna go on as hot a run this year in either of the club competitions. I think it'd be like quarterfinals or something again in both the League Cup and FA Cup. I'd love to see us go further. Maybe it's been a little while since we put our name on the best trophy of the lot, the League Cup. So maybe we can go on a bit of a run there. That was our trophy for a while. It was ours. We think 4 in a row. So it'd be nice to get that one back in the stadium. But I think I think we struggle a bit more domestically this year.
Interesting. So we normally ask all of our guests who come on the podcast for the first time, whether it's my NFL one across the pod or whether it's this one, we ask the fans why you're a fan of that team. Now, with Aaron, with your accent, we're going to avoid asking you why you're a fan because we know why. You got the Manchester accent, we know it's City, but of course you've got a different story than normal that you've told me before about the fact that you almost went against the family team.
Yeah. So my dad's a Man United fan. My mum is a Liverpool fan. Most of my family, especially on my dad's side, all Reds. all Man United. On my mum's side, they're pretty much all Man United apart from my uncle, who's a City fan. He didn't really have much to do with this, but it's nice that I did have someone growing up to wallow with every now and again. But yeah, so I kind of I'm a wind. You won't be able to tell by this, but if you ever knew like properly, I'm a wind up merchant. Um, and I think I've grown out of it. I haven't, but I was way worse as a child. I just wanted to wind everybody up and go against the grain on everything. You tell me that the grass is green, well, I think it's grey, or purple or something. So it naturally, logically followed that when my dad took me to my first football game, which was United Celtic in like 2000 or something. I decided at that point I was going to be a Manchester City fan. And when so I thought it was dead funny and it would wind everybody up. And after a little while, like you kind of go round it for about a year. So I was watching City games, all that sort of stuff, but just kind of in my head, it was just to wind my dad up. But my dad never actually got wound up. My uncles did. It really wound them up. But when you kind of get to a point where United are obviously, this is like late 90s, early 2000s. So United are shit hot. And you get to a point where, like, if I turn around now, City are rubbish. If I turn around now and say, I'm only joking, I'm really a United fan. Like, I'm a glory hunter. And of course you are, because United have just won the Premier League. Or, of course you are, because United are on top at the moment, City are in Division 2. So I think it's one of those where, like, you kind of have to sit there and go, right, no, I think I'm stuck with this now. Crap. Dug myself in way too deep into a hole. Well, who's laughing now though? That's all I say.
Exactly.
But yeah, so went against the family to be a bit of a wind-up merchant and found myself stuck with Joey Barton and Richard Dunn and Sylvan and that lot. So lesson learned, it might be a bit crap at the first time. If you decide to be a wind-up merchant and go against the grain, it's not good at first. But 10 years later, 20 years later, you will have the last laugh.
Yeah, I think that story alone is proof why. Why you should never change teams. For me, that is, people going about, support your local and all that, and I don't really believe in that as much as of criticize people who don't do that. Obviously, I'm normally on the receiving end of these kind of comments, but you look at things like the two-team thing always bugs me. But the one thing I think is the biggest crime in football to fan to change teams. I think that there's sometimes things I can understand why. I mean, the likes of going to act at NFL, why Browns fans have changed teams recently, or for example, I can even get behind some teams changing from Newcastle with the Saudi stuff going on, especially if you're part of the LGBTQ plus community. I can see why you would change teams in that sense, but
yeah,
other than that, if it's just because you like a team they're doing better at the moment, I think that's the worst thing. And I think that there's a couple of people in my school. I mean, one guy changed from Portsmouth to Newcastle, which for a while seemed like a bad thing, but looking back at it now, it was a good thing to do. But even then, I would never have changed teams. And then I got a friend in the school of mine who we have drifted apart. I'm not going to lie, but he was a Man U fan until 2012. Funny enough, even though his family is from City, he did change to City. I still think if you're in sixth form, at that you're not a kid. At that point, you should have your team, and if you're claim to be a fan of a team, you shouldn't then change teams. So
no,
I think you've been rewarded in a way you've rewarded for not being a glory hunter, because there are a lot of younger fans who have that sort of name tarnished with them. Glory hunter, if they're a fan who is below the age of 15, they can always have glory hunter attached to them. But you actually went against the grain in a way. You didn't pick a team who was winning all the trophies. You went for a team that was in Division 2 at the time, which for all younger listeners is what now is League One. So you've been there through the hard times and you've seen the team rise up. So in that sense, I think it's actually a good thing you didn't pick Man U, because whilst you had a great childhood, you had a great 15 years, even though I think they are getting back to old times a little bit now. I think Ten Hag is doing a great job. I do think at the same time, you have been rewarded for that.
Yeah, and it's sometimes it's about how you fall in love with football, I think. So for someone like yourself, the Liverpool team you grew up with was incredible, and just an incredible and they make you fall in love with football. I think if I was to go with at that young age who I fell in love with football for, I would just be a Barcelona fan, or I think looking back at being like 7 and 8, it'd be that Arsenal team and the Invincibles team with your Henrys, your Bergkamps, your Lundbergs, your Perez's, Vieiras, Sol Campbells. The team just played beautiful football the whole way through. And but I learned way too quickly learned way too quickly the words to feed the goat, feed the goat, feed the goat, and he will score. So my mum still recalls to this day how I'd be like 5, 6 years old, walking around my house singing it, and having like my uncle, be at my nan's or something, and my uncles would be like, "Shut the like please look, stop him sing, tell him to sing 1, 2 Georgie Best or however the chant goes, can't remember, instead or something." But it's what I think once you kind of once you get that club, and if you truly do embrace that, you truly do kind of fall in love with the sport through it. They're yours. Then that's it. I couldn't agree more. So and I think for me, following the NFL was a bit of a kick in the face for because I held that whole kind of support your local for so long. But how I can sit there and say support your local and then also be a large fan of a team in a sport that plays 3,500 miles away, and then somehow justify the same thing when you're also, I know you get that argument of like, well, it doesn't matter whether they're good or whether they're bad. They're your local team, they're your team. And it's like, well, we have an American football team in Manchester. And for the English, for our Brit Ball League, they're very good. For the BAFA League, they're very, very good. The current champions of the BAFA League. But I still support the Lions rather than I go watch the Titans sometimes, but I still support that. It's like having to kind of, when you realize that kind of, it gave me a new perspective on actually what it means and how dedicated you have to be sometimes to support a team from so far away. And I look at some of the teams that have some of the fans that are in Eastern Asia, Australia, because I have one of my uncles now lives in Australia and still pretty much watches every single United game. We've got, as you will as well, you have lots of friends in the States that we've met through social media and things like that, and you realize how some of these people are getting up at 5 in the morning, 4 in the morning, or they're also staying up till 3, 4 in the morning just to watch these games happen. So you can't knock the commitment and whatnot that some of these people have to actually support it. As long as once you've latched onto that team, as long as you're with them, then and that's your team.
Yeah, I mean, they'll also be asleep at work, just to put the pun in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that, if I'm honest, I think there's a quick quote I heard years ago on the show you might like, I don't know, Coronation Street, where they said that you can't help who you fall in love with. And I think that there's a bit of that with football, because in the day, I had no choice in my team, Liverpool. Like, my dad forced it on me when I was 4 years old. I mean, I've got my mum's grandparents actually are from the Wirral. My great grandpa especially. He played 2 reserve games for Everton, so I've always got that get out clause. My dad forced on me. He's from Wales, like myself, and first game he watched Liverpool, losing an FA Cup final, and I think that he always gets tainted with that glory hunter role. But for me, 6 years old, 2002, whatever I was back then, I had no concept of glory hunter. I was basically given a team, and that was it. And I think a lot of people have that. And I think at the same time, I've got Newport half an hour away, I've got Cardiff an hour away, but I was born in Cardiff, but I don't really like Newport that much. I'm not from there, but I don't like the city that much. And with Cardiff, I don't live there. So in the day, it's like, it's not as if it's a team that, like, where the town I'm from, it's not a team. There's one that plays in the 3rd division of Welsh football, but I've been playing kickabout with my mates on the same pitch of their training session going on at the same time. I've just kicked the ball around. So it's I do think the day that I think whilst if you support your local team, then great. But I think these days some people are support two teams because they feel they have to support their local team. I've met people who go, I'm a Man U fan and I'm a Swansea fan, or I'm a Man U fan, I'm a Newport fan. But at the end of the day, they've only been a fan of this team for like 3 or 4 years, and I think that people now are almost feeling pressure to support their local, and therefore doing for me a more of a cardinal sin of having two teams. Because what happens then
Yeah.
when these two teams meet? Because you're gonna have to want one of them to win, and you can't sit there and be a fan if you told me, oh wait a sec, I actually support this team, but I want them to lose against this team. So for me, I think that they support who you want to support as long as you don't change teams.
Yeah.
Have two teams. Who really gives a shit?
I think
That's basically it.
I think for me as well, there's that bit of like as long as you kind of have a reason other than that team won trophies, and I like teams that win trophies. For like, if you were to turn around and say, I get that you've already had that kind of the reasons behind it, but if you turn around to me and said Steven Gerrard, that as a kid you loved Steven Gerrard, I get that. Or if I was talking to someone now and they said, listen, Aguero was my favorite striker, or Haaland, now we've got a lot of people who've coming through Haaland, you get a lot of Al Hilal are looking like they're going to get it, but we've had a lot of Algerians within the Manchester City framework because of Mahrez. And some people nowadays will follow a player rather than a team, and I get it with countries like Algeria that aren't exactly world renowned for their footballing prowess and the players that they've continuously produced for decades. They have one or two players here and there, and they are so proud to have that player be from Algeria that they're going to follow it. I get that. But as long as there's a reason behind it, whether it's the football that they played, whether it's some of the players that you really felt attached to, whether it's you looking at maybe, I don't know, you used to just simply go, or you felt an attachment to the place or the city, or, there are many ways that you can do that and still have what I feel is a legit reason that's not just simply, well, they won. So, I like that bit, and we'll stick with that. You find a lot of people who have done, but even then, I think I'm fortunate enough to know quite a few people who did say start supporting United during those kind of late 90s, mid 2000s, who for their sins have stood by that team throughout the last 10 years. When listen, I watched my team in League One. That was I think that I've watched my team get relegated. That was heartbreak. So I feel like turning around and saying, finishing 7th that year was true heartbreak. But they've stuck by the club through for what will feel like a lot of thick.
Yeah.
So I can appreciate that because they've stuck by it and stuck with it.
Yeah, I think my brother's the same thing. I mean, he became a fan in 1999. The first game he ever watched was Man U, Bayern Munich, and I think that whilst obviously his reasoning is clear to see, he hasn't neglected his team in the last 10 years. He's watching every game on TV. He's not really a big stadium goer. That goes for any sport, but in terms of TV, he'll be watching every game. So I think that whilst I'm not someone who will recommend to people to support a team because of a player, because one day they will leave or they retire, or they'll and so while one of your former players spend time in jail, and do something bad. I think there's always a reason why you should maybe. I think the city and connection with the place is probably more for me something I recommend, especially NFL, a sport we both love. I always say to people who want to get into it, don't pick it based on the player. And I think that with football as well, if you got a city that you love, like you've been to, like we had our Bournemouth episode, Oliver Lee is not from Bournemouth, but he went to a lot of holidays when he was a kid in Bournemouth. So therefore, that's why he chose Bournemouth. I think that these kind of things are commendable, but I think absolutely things like Algeria, I'm sure if, I could have easily become a Gareth Bale fan for Wales, or I'm sure a lot of, other countries where they got one-star player, like South Korea, for example. I bet there's a lot of Spurs fans because Heung-min Son, I should say, sorry. And I think that when he leaves, I think a lot of fans will jump ship to whoever he goes. And I think that that is a big thing. I think that we
There was
I think certainly if you go, oh, because of they win trophies, I think that's probably the one way. Like, come on now, because
yeah,
at the end of the day, no team wins trophies forever. Like, Bayern Munich, yes, but they had their bad time in the noughties. They were in the Europa League or UEFA Cup at one point. They played
yeah,
um they played someone I forgot they played now in the noughties in UEFA Cup and Bolton. I think it was Bolton Wanderers. I think so. It's yeah, I think
yeah.
he's
Because
got
Bolton
a reason.
were really good in the mid
Mm,
2000s. But I mean, they're
Big
JJ
Sam,
Kocher,
Stelios.
so good they named him twice.
Yeah. Um, but let's move on because
Yeah,
we're on a massive tangent here, but it's been a good
yeah,
chat. But in terms of final couple of questions, I know you told me you've got two parts to these questions. The
yeah.
first of all, favorite ever City player.
So yeah, so kind of growing up, it was Sean Wright Phillips. Um, and all time, I to this day, I will. I think it'd be a long time. Someone like Haaland would have to continue on this trajectory that he's on for now for like 15 years at City and only City. To shake this David Silva. He's
Okay, okay, that's he's a player that I
favorite
love
of all
watching.
time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he could best ever players. I think that the three for me have got to be, or four, you said, Company, Torre, David Silva, and Aguero. But I think that for me, I think it's a strong case with David Silva because he was there from the start. He was there since
Yeah,
2010. And for me, I know I was meant to go to a Sociedad game in March, but didn't. I lost my passport. But chance to see him play was something I was very excited for. And there's not many players for your team of this era that I love because they've broken my heart so many times. But David Silva is somebody you can't really hate. You can't really hate because he's so good on to watch him. So the players to watch, I don't think I found many better in the Premier League than him. I generally don't think I do because he sort of some players, some players like he reminds me a bit like Nadal, no, sorry, Federer, I should say, because he makes it look effortless. He's some players, you can tell they've worked at it. Ronaldo is obviously the best example of it. But some players like a Messi, they you can clearly tell they were born to play football. And I think David Silva was one of them. Effortless, controlled. He was never bulky ever. He was always a skinny guy. Speaking from personal, I'm a skinny guy myself, and I know what it's like. And I've been absolutely muscled in the midfield when I played football in school. And the way he can just pick up the ball and just no one can get to him, and he makes these passes whether it's to the left, to the right, whether it's through balls, always with such ease. So for me, he
yeah,
was a player that I think many, not just myself, many loved watching.
yeah. And he's one of those for me. I've always and my poor suffering wife can attest to this. How often I turn around and say that's the guy who I'll be telling my grandkids, and they're talking about whoever they're talking about in 40, 50 years or whatever kind of generation I'm a granddad, and this is what they're at the age where they talk about football players. I'd be that granddad who's going, listen, I watched David Silva, right? I watched him play many times in front of my own eyes, and you have no. I'll never forget being told, kind of at early age, going to the Etihad and having some an elderly gentleman saying, "Listen, you don't know how good Colin Bell was, or Mike Summerby and whatnot." And I get it, like I'll be that guy, but with David Silva, um, spreading pure David Silva propaganda for the rest of my life. And I couldn't agree more. And I'll never forget the day in the days that we'd signed him just after Spain had won the World Cup in 2010. And some of the comments that were getting made were like, he's too small. He's going to get bullied off every ball. And I think someone said, you'd be lucky if we see him for 2 years in the Premier League. And 10 years later, he just left. And a wonderful gentleman of one of my wife's good friends at work was saying that he'd gone on holiday to some like Gran Canaria, went off to because obviously when you go near the beach and it's all full of tourists and Tenerife, sorry. When you go to the beaches and it's all full of tourists, this guy was like, listen, I'm going to go about 10 minutes up the road to a little cafe because there's no tourists, because tourists don't go that way. Sat there having like a coffee or something like that, and who sat next to him? David Silva in this
No
cafe.
way.
And he was like, listen, like, I'm really, really sorry. I know you're in the middle of Tenerife and you're trying to have a relaxed time. Please, can I just have a picture or something? Like, I'm really, really, really sorry. And David Silva was just like, yeah, definitely. Let's go for it. Sat and spoke to him. He said something like they were sat there for about half an hour, just
Wow.
chatting away about loads of stuff. David's the nicest. So just wonderful guy. And yeah, true Rolls Royce of a football player. One of the, I'll say millions of times, I've watched a lot of players play at the Etihad Stadium. Been lucky enough to watch Messi in front of my own eyes, Ronaldo, um, Mbappe, Neymar, Suarez. I've watched a lot of kind of the Lewandowski. I've watched a lot of the better players over the last decade or so play at the Etihad that aren't City players, including the best ones over the last decade that are. And David Silva for me stands as a cut above the rest as ones that I've been able to watch. Just be able to watch him operate in front of my own eyes has been absolute pleasure.
I mean,
So yeah, best of all time for me.
that's an amazing story because, you know, it reminds me a little bit of when the story around that a guy. I don't know, I think he asked him for a picture first, but some guy met Fabinho, a player that I love, and it's, you know, it's a shame that my favourite three players of the club era might be all leaving this summer. But he's a player I've loved, you know, and the Liverpool fan, asked him for a picture. They ended up talking like your friend David Silva, and ended up going
Yeah,
for a meal together in the next day, so or at evening or something. So I think there's sometimes footballers who do go above and beyond. I think that's incredible. But talk of David Silva, does it make you a little bit sad that he never got the farewell he deserved because of
yes,
COVID? Obviously, the year he
yeah.
left was the year where he had the mid-season break or the sort of the March to June break. Does that sort of almost feel you a little bit of sadness, the fact that he never got that
Yeah.
true Etihad farewell and send off?
Same with Aguero as well, because Aguero's last game at home for us was the one where only 10,000 were allowed him
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the full COVID season. And I don't know if you saw it the other day. I think I tweeted something like, "Is it me or a testimonial's gone now? A testimonial's a thing anymore?"
Yeah, it's a good
Because
point. It's a good point. I don't think I've heard one for ages.
the first United game I went to was a Ryan Giggs testimonial. And it was in 2001. He didn't retire
What?
for another like 10 years. Um, I remember Company's testimonial because again went to that one with my little brother, and there's a Company. He'd just gone to Anderlecht and was the player manager there, wasn't he, for a little bit, and he'd injured himself on the way, typical Company fashion. Injured himself just before the game, so ended up didn't play in his own testimonial, which, like I say, very, very, very Vincent Company towards the end of his career. But there was always that problem. Like Vincent Company got on the mic at the time and he went, because David Silva by that point had already announced, like, look, listen, this is my last year at Manchester City. My contract's up. I'm not renewing it. I'm going back to Spain. And everyone just kind of went, yeah, okay. You could do whatever you want, to be quite honest, at this point. And yeah, Vincent Company got up and he said, I'll be here next year for David Silva's. Don't worry about it. And it never happened. And then a year later, David Aguero leaves and he didn't have one. And then a year later, Fernandinho leaves and the same again. So, like, at this point, I'm just wondering, a testimonial still a thing?
Yeah,
Because,
it's a good point because there's never one for you know, for a lot of our legends. Like, you know, I I don't know what the reason is. Yeah, because it's not, we're way past the point where COVID is even a worry now. So yeah, I've not even heard of one for ages. Maybe they just,
your
I don't know.
Henderson, for Liverpool, your Hendersons, your Firminos,
Milner deserves
Milner,
one. Yeah.
you know, guys like that who've been mainstays at the club, been a huge, huge part of that success. You would think that, I don't know, do you watch the US Office?
I actually watched it for the very first time about a month ago and I didn't enjoy it.
Right. Okay. Well, for anyone who's listening who does know it, there's the episode where they try and lump everybody's birthday together in one day. It was Jim and Dwight, and they were like, listen, rather than every other day having to celebrate and do this whole thing for someone's birthday, we're going to have one day where we celebrate everybody's birthday. I don't know if there are clubs out there that are building up like, we're going to do a testimonial, and we're waiting until we've got 11 testimonials, a goalkeeper, a right back, a left back, and two, and they're going, right, we'll do one testimonial for all of them in one go. I don't know if it's going to be like that, but it feels like ages since we've had one.
Yeah, you think teams want to do it because of the money you can get from it. Like fans can pay, even if it's like a tenner, that's like they can make money from that, and it's good for the player. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's that planning it and realizing oh, it may not happen. I don't know. It's one. It's hard
Yeah.
to know. Final
So,
question for you before we do end this podcast.
yeah.
Is finally, this may be an obvious one. I don't know, but favorite memory as a fan.
Um, like I said, I tried to come up with a new one and an old one for you, just because I feel like again, it's like talking about two different football clubs at this point. As a kid, it was the last derby at Main Road, 3-1, with famous old and Derby Day the scores were level, then the goal was fed by Neville. Silly goal,
Oh,
silly
that
boy
one,
should
yeah.
have known for four, not should have known for sure, feed the goat and he will score. Um So that one always special. And then I think it was the first one back at the City of Manchester Stadium, now the Etihad, that was the 4-1. And Sean Phillips scored that worldie. That was just a great one. And then you're talking new era. Aguero still stands out as the Aguero against QPR. Still to this day, goosebumps whenever I see it, goosebumps whenever I hear about it. Got them now, all right. So that's a huge one. And then I think now, if not close, if he hasn't already taken it, it's got to be Rodri smashing the ball home in Istanbul, and or Lukaku save against for Inter.
Oh my God,
Um,
what an idiot.
or that, and just kind of that, or when that final whistle went, because I think when we talk about moments like that, I obviously went fucking crazy when Rodri's goal went in, but then went straight back behind the couch watching it through my fingers. So I don't know if I could truly appreciate that goal until half an hour or so later on. So because what I call it a moment. But obviously Aguero or that one for 100% sure.
Yeah, I think most fans, football fans, even non-City fans, will always remember where they were when the goal happened. And I remember, obviously, back in 2012, I'd have been in lower, lower sixth form, and my brother was he first year university, but he was back home for some reason, and it was obviously he's a Man U fan, so. Of course, this is me, someone who's grown up. I got Champions League win in 2005. I got the FA Cup 2006 and all that. But seeing him, seeing win league after league after league. It's his childhood was very different to mine, whereas adult life was a lot different to mine. I've had a lot more joy
Yeah.
in my 20s than I have my teens and early days. And I think that I remember that day very special because my brother obviously was there, and most Man U fans, I know some that weren't even watching the game because they were just expecting to beat QPR. Everyone thought it was a formality, and then of course City went 1-0 up, but then 2-1 down. Of course, Dribble Cisse scored, Jimmy Mackie, and my brother was, and obviously Manu winning 1-0. Sunderland, obviously how it finished in the end. And I remember just his reaction when the goal went in for Guerrero. He actually fell to the floor, in just utter despair. I mean, I teased him a lot for it, but really I got it sort of, I got payback karma in a way because I got the Gerard S word and I also got the Gundogan goal, which again is very similar to that day, but with 50 minutes to go rather than 15 seconds. So
Yeah.
I saw years later, I said to him after that game finished at Villa, I said, you know what, Rob, after all these years, I do apologise because I know exactly how you feel now because even to this day, I still, when they went 2-0 up with Villa, when it's Gerard managing, Coutinho scoring the goal to go 2-0 up, I thought it was fate. all week I was saying to my dad, it's going to happen. Coutinho's going to score a last minute winner. I had this feeling it was going to happen, and for a while, it was coming up true. Even though we were drawing, and I did think for a while, oh, we're gonna bot this. City's gonna lose, and we're gonna not even win. So yeah, I don't think if we ever were top of the table that day in the end, but yeah, I was thinking like when Coutinho scored, it felt like fate. Off that day, I think for me that is probably the second worst day ever as a fan, behind the Office one I've just mentioned. It's not a good one, and even though I think he's a great man, that name Gundogan will always stick in my head for a name that will always, along with Demba Ba, will always haunt me.
And it's it. I've got. I don't think I've ever asked a Liverpool fan this. So does it? It might feel like a bad question, but I know De Bruyne set up the third. Does it hurt you a little bit knowing that Sterling came on and changed that game for us? And I don't mean this in like a little jab at you, by the way. I'm genuinely curious. Like Sterling that day, I think I said to, I was at parents watching that with my little brother and said to him, I was like, brought Sterling and Zinchenko on us, and my brother was kicking off because he was like, Sterling's been crap this year. He's rubbish. He's terrible. He's gonna. And I went, trust me, like what Sterling does bring for his sins is energy and just trying to drive to the byline and get it in. That's going to work today. And so will Zinchenko. Zinchenko's very clutch. So, and lo and behold, Sterling changed the game for us. Zinchenko then set up Rodri's goal. So, like, it always makes you think a bit like Sterling of all players came on to change that one. And you had your Steven Gerrard and your Coutinho to set it up for you, and then Sterling comes on and ruins it.
If I'm honest, no, because first of all, I didn't actually realise he'd actually done change the game, because I know we changed channels to Liverpool. I think when it was literally just before it went to that, we flicked to Liverpool game. I didn't know we were drawing at the time, and it's a case where actually as we turn over, they then did the split screen and showed that Coutinho had scored. So we saw we're definitely sticking with it now, and it also happened. It's such a blur. It was like the split screen was like they scored again. So it's all really happened quickly, and I didn't really get time to really think in actually. And also, I'm not really someone who hates Sterling. I know it's a lot of Liverpool fans, my dad included, who hate Sterling for leaving. But the way I see it, you got a team that was Gerald just left. The team is in downfall. You're playing with Balotelli, Ricky Lambert, and Fabio Borini, or you can join this exciting project where you're playing with Aguero, David Silva, Vincent Kompany, at the time Joe Hart, and I think that it's we pinch him from QPR. It's not as if he's a local lad; he's from Wimbledon, from Wembley. Sorry, so I don't really view that the same. But I think what hurts me more is that same game where the Gerrard S word happened. I always try to refuse saying that word. The second goal, which everyone forgets, Willian scored. Torres set it up, and he could have scored that easily. But we know why he passed it, because he didn't want to score really in that game. But he really would have scored if he was playing against Arsenal, against Chelsea, against Fulham, whether he's scoring against City or Newcastle. He'd have tapped that in, but he did pass to Willian. And for a guy that, for me, to this day, top 3 players of all time are Firmino, then Torres, and then Gerrard number 1. So Torres, the player, even though he left to Chelsea, the one transfer that really broke my heart, and the player I still love to this day, even though he left us, that would have been even heartbreaking. The fact that he set it up, I look at that more in pain. But of course, it's a shame, because again Sterling, I know he didn't win the Champions League, but he has won six Premier Leagues, 5 Premier Leagues, whatever it was. He's won a lot of Premier Leagues, and at the end of the day, the Premier League means a lot more to the English players than Champions League means a lot more to the foreign players. So I think for him, he probably grew up as a child wanting to win Premier Leagues. So for him, he's
and
gone
FA Cups, looking at Wembley.
Almost scored. He scored 2 goals against Watford in that 6-0. He's a big part of a lot of City's great success, and I think that he probably values that more than just one league and one Champions League. Obviously, he would have got Champions League if he stayed at City an extra year. But he probably feels a little bit sad about that. But overall, I don't really hate him.
That's fair.
He's making a career move, and I think he's got the best out of it. And now he's getting a bit older, and he's not doing well at Chelsea. But this season with Poch, he could turn things around again. So I don't really view it really as anything too bad. But we are going to end it there. There has been the Eurotrips podcast. So thank you, Aaron, for coming on.
No problem. Thank you for having me. And we've had a few exchanges. I always love chatting with you because I think I learn as much off you as I do at any other point. So I really appreciate it, man. Thank you for having me.
No problem at all. And of course, if you are an NFL fan, you can find Aaron's work on the Sleep at Work NFL podcast, which is a podcast where he asks NFL fans like myself. I was a guest on it a while ago now, where he asked them how you became a fan in the UK.
Obviously, and that's obviously the best episode that we've got as well. So,
oh, is it? Oh, that's good.
Just by far. I mean, no disrespect to any of the other guests, but it's by far clearly the best episode.
If you haven't yet listened to that and you are an NFL fan, you can find out why I became a Miami Dolphins fan. But for those who want to follow you on Twitter, Aaron, how can they find you?
As you've already mentioned, I am a Mank, so dead easy to find me. Aaron the Mank. And that's on every social media. It's a statement as much as anything. I am Aaron the Mank, so you can find me at Aaron the Mank.
Brilliant. So if you are listening to it, whether it's in your car, whether you're watching on YouTube, either way, do give him a follow because he does some good spaces about both sports. He likes his Detroit Lions. Obviously, you'll know he likes from this episode. He likes Man City, so do check his work out. And if you want to chat with him, he's very open to a DM.
Oh yeah, always. And yeah, by the way, if I'd like to drop this one in as well. There, if you are unsure, because there's like 4 ways of spelling Aaron apparently now. If you've ever seen the Key and Peele sketch, I done messed up Aaron. So Aaron is the correct spelling of Aaron.
Okay, so do check him out. But in the meantime, this has been a Eurotrips podcast, both on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. I've been your host, Andy. This has been Aaron, and we will see you guys next time.
England 4, Germany 1,